Sundar walks in unnoticed. The evening sky over the city was painted in soft orange and purple, fading slowly into night. Sundar Pichai, the CEO known to the world for leading one of the biggest companies, sat quietly in the back of a car, staring out the window. He had told no one where he was going, not his assistants, not his team, not even his family. Tonight was different. Tonight he wanted to disappear from the weight of titles and responsibilities. Tonight he wanted to step into his world as an ordinary man, without cameras, without recognition, without anyone bowing down to his name. The car stopped in front of a tall glass building with warm golden lights glowing from the inside. It was his restaurant. Few people even knew he owned it. Years ago, when he first dreamed of creating something outside of technology, he had quietly opened a small restaurant under a different name. He wanted it to be a place where food was served with respect, kindness, and heart. Over time, it grew into something larger, something beautiful, but he never revealed himself to the staff or to the customers as the owner. He always appeared only as a silent visitor, blending into the crowd. Tonight he stepped out wearing nothing more than simple jeans, an old shirt, and a jacket. No one would recognize him like this. He pushed the door open, and a wave of smells welcomed him. Freshly baked bread, spices, warm soup, and grilled vegetables. Laughter filled the air, clinking of glasses, the soft sound of music playing in the background. The restaurant was alive, vibrant, and filled with people enjoying their evening. Sundar stood still for a moment, just breathing it in. It was his dream alive. Yet no one around knew the man who created it was standing right there among them. He walked toward the corner, choosing a seat that gave him a wide view of the restaurant. Waiters moved quickly between tables, balancing trays, offering smiles and welcoming guests. Sundar loved to watch how people worked when they thought no one important was watching, because in truth, that was when a person's real character appeared. As his eyes scanned the room, he noticed a young server standing near the kitchen door. Her shoulders were slouched, her head lowered, and though she tried to force a smile, Sundar caught the way her hands trembled when she placed plates on the table. She looked like she had been crying just moments before. Sundar froze. Something inside him whispered that this moment was not ordinary. He leaned forward, his heart suddenly heavy with concern. He watched her more carefully. She kept moving between tables, doing her best to hide her pain, but her eyes were red, and once, when she thought no one was watching, she wiped a tear quickly with the back of her hand. Sundar felt a strange pull inside, as if the universe had placed him here at this very moment for a reason. He remembered his own childhood, his mother working hard, his father sacrificing silently, and how many nights they had struggled yet never showed their tears in public. He knew the pain of hiding struggles while trying to stand strong. Seeing that girl in his restaurant broke something inside him. But Sundar also knew he couldn't simply walk over as the CEO of Google and demand answers. That would only frighten her or make her feel exposed. No, he had to find a way to see her story, to understand what lay beneath those quiet tears. So, he sat patiently, pretending to look at the menu. He ordered something small just to blend in, but his mind was fixed on the young woman. He noticed how the other staff sometimes looked at her, almost annoyed, whispering as she walked by. He noticed how a manager gave her a sharp look when she dropped a spoon. There was something deeper here, something hidden behind her tears. A few minutes later, fate placed her right at his table. She walked over with hesitant steps, holding a glass of water. "Good evening, sir," she said softly, her voice shaking, just enough for Sundar to notice. He looked up into her eyes, and for the first time, she seemed to realize that he was watching her, not as just another customer, but as a human being who cared. She tried to mask it, but Sundar saw everything in that single glance. The weight she carried, the sorrow she was hiding, and the silent cry for help she could not speak aloud. He gave her a kind smile, the type of smile that didn't need words. She placed the glass on the table and quickly turned, almost as if she was afraid her emotions might spill out if she stayed any longer. Sundar felt his chest tighten. The rest of the evening blurred around him. People came and left. Laughter echoed, dishes were served, But Sundar's attention never left that girl. Who was she? What had broken her so badly that she cried while working in a place that was supposed to bring joy? And why did he, a man who had met thousands of people, feel so deeply shaken by this one stranger? As closing time approached, Sundar made a decision. He waited. He pretended to be finishing his meal, though his plate was already empty. Slowly, one by one, the customers left. The lights dimmed, chairs were stacked, and the restaurant grew quiet. The young woman wiped tables, her face tired, her movements heavy. Finally, when she stepped outside into the cool night air, Sundar followed at a distance. She walked alone down the dim street, her steps slow, her figure small against the darkness. Then suddenly she stopped near a bus stand and sat down on the bench. Sundar hid behind a wall, not wanting to scare her. But then he saw something that made his heart race. She pulled out a small photograph from her pocket, pressed it against her chest, and broke down in tears under the streetlight. The sight hit him harder than anything he had felt in years. This wasn't just sadness. This was a soul in pain. Sundar knew at that very moment that his night had just begun. And as he stood there, torn between revealing himself and staying hidden, something happened that made him freeze completely. A tall man in a dark coat suddenly appeared from the shadows and walked straight toward her. The man in the shadows, the street was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the faint sound of crickets. Sundar stood frozen, his breath caught in his chest. The young server sat on the bus stand, her shoulders shaking as she cried into the small photograph she clutched against her chest. And then, like a scene torn from some hidden script, a tall man in a dark coat emerged from the shadows. His steps were slow but purposeful, his face hard to see in the dim light. Sundar's instincts tightened. Something about the man's approach felt wrong, too sudden, too heavy for a stranger walking by. Sundar's mind raced. He had built companies, solved problems that stretched across continents, handled crises in boardrooms with billions at stake. But in that moment he felt none of the power of his title. He was just one man standing in the dark watching another man walk toward a crying girl who already looked broken. His heart thudded in his chest. Should he intervene? Should he reveal himself? The man stopped right in front of her. His voice was low, almost sharp. "Where is it?" he asked. She flinched, quickly wiping her tears, trying to stand but failing. Sundar leaned slightly forward, straining to catch every word. "I told you, I don't have it," the girl whispered, her voice trembling with fear. The man's body stiffened. "Don't lie to me, Mia. Mia." Sundar finally had her name. He clenched his fists unconsciously. The conversation was filled with tension that went far beyond a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't about money owed for a small thing, it wasn't about casual arguments. The way the man stood over her, the way she shrank under his presence. It was clear he held power over her life in some way. "You know what will happen if you don't give me what I asked for," the man continued, his tone sharper now. Sundar's pulse quickened. He could no longer just stand and watch, but he also knew barging in too soon could make things worse. He stepped out slowly from his hiding place, walking toward them as if he were just another passerby. "Excuse me," Sundar said, his voice calm but firm. "Is everything all right here?" The man turned sharply, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Sundar. Mia looked up too, and for a fleeting second, her tear-streaked face revealed both fear and relief. She didn't know who Sundar was, but the presence of someone else gave her a breath of safety. The man sneered, his lips curling. "This is none of your business, walk away." But Sundar didn't move. He kept his gaze steady, his posture calm. The way he had learned long ago to hold himself when facing difficult rooms full of people doubting him. "She looks upset." "I don't think it's nothing." Mia shook her head quickly, as if begging Sundar silently not to get involved. But that only made him more certain. There was something here that needed to be uncovered. The man's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Last warning. Leave." Sundar felt the tension coil in the air like a storm ready to break. He had a choice. He could step back and pretend this wasn't his problem, or he could take the harder road, the road of compassion and courage. And in that second, the image of his own mother flickered in his memory. He remembered her walking home from long shifts, tired yet still carrying groceries, never once complaining. What if she had been alone and someone had cornered her like this? Would he want strangers to turn away? He stayed rooted. "I think she needs help," he said simply. The man's jaw tightened. He took a threatening step closer, but then suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He cursed under his breath, glanced at Mia one last time, and then turned sharply, disappearing back into the shadows from where he came. Silence wrapped the street again. Sundar exhaled slowly, his heartbeat still racing. He looked at Mia. She sat frozen, gripping the photograph tightly, her hands trembling. "Are you all right?" Sundar asked gently, lowering his voice so it was filled only with kindness. Mia blinked as if trying to bring herself back from whatever world of fear she had been thrown into. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "He'll be angry now." "Who was he?" Sundar asked softly. She shook her head, pulling her jacket tighter around herself, her face pale. "It doesn't matter. Thank you. But you should go, please." The way she said please wasn't a casual dismissal. It was heavy with desperation, as if her problems were too dangerous for anyone else to step into. Sundar hesitated. He wanted to ask more, to understand what danger she was in, but he could see she was too shaken to talk. "Can I at least make sure you get home safe?" he offered. Mia shook her head again, but her eyes betrayed her. They revealed how terrified she really was. Sundar decided he couldn't leave her alone even if she refused help. He quietly followed from a distance as she boarded a bus and rode through the city. Every stop, he stayed a few paces behind, careful not to alarm her but unwilling to let her face the night by herself. Finally, she got off at a worn-out neighborhood with cracked sidewalks and dim street lamps. She walked into a small apartment building, the kind where walls carried stories of struggle and silence. Sundar stood outside, staring at the door she had just entered. For a long time he remained there. The photograph of her crying under the streetlight still burned in his mind. He didn't know why this girl mattered so much to him already, but he knew he could not forget her. As he turned to leave, he noticed something lying near the bus stand bench where she had been earlier. He bent down and picked it up. It was another, small photograph crumpled at the edges. His eyes widened as he looked at it. It was a picture of Mia with a young boy, no older than 10, smiling brightly, holding a toy car in his hand. A chill went down Sundar's spine. Suddenly, everything felt heavier. This wasn't just about her, there was someone else depending on her, someone innocent. And in that instant, Sundar realized this story was much bigger than he had imagined. The photograph of truth, the night air, followed Sundar all the way back to his car, heavy and restless. He sat behind the wheel, the photograph of Mia and the young boy resting in his hand. The boy's smile was bright, full of innocence, but his clothes looked old, and his small hands clutched the toy car as if it was his only treasure. Sundar stared at it for a long time, his heart twisting. Suddenly, the tears Maya had hidden, the fear in her voice, the man's threatening tone, all of it began to take shape in his mind. She wasn't just a server struggling through a bad night. She was a mother fighting battles too heavy for her shoulders. He leaned his head back against the seat, closing his eyes. His own memories rushed back. Memories of his parents working hard so he and his siblings could dream. He remembered nights when his mother skipped meals so he could eat. Days when his father fixed broken things with hands that never stopped, aching. He understood sacrifice. He understood what it meant to carry the weight of family silently. But there was still the question. Who was that man? What did he want from Mia? And why did her fear run so deep? The next morning, Sundar returned to his office, but his mind refused to rest. Meetings passed in a blur. Presentations came and went. But every time he glanced down at his desk, the folded photograph in his pocket seemed to burn like a secret he couldn't ignore. Finally, he made a decision. He couldn't sit in silence. He had to know more. That evening, as the city lights came alive again, Sundar walked back into the restaurant. This time, He didn't sit far away. He chose a table where he could see Mia clearly as she worked. She looked tired, more than before, her eyes carrying a dull red shade that told him she hadn't slept well. Yet, she moved through the restaurant, with determination, trying to keep up the appearance of normalcy. When she came to his table, Sundar offered her a kind smile. "Long night yesterday?" he asked softly. She froze for a fraction of a second, her eyes darting to his, searching for meaning in his words. Then she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's always long here," she replied quickly. He didn't press. Instead, he spoke gently. "You remind me of my mother. She worked hard, no matter how much life weighed on her, but I always wish someone had asked her if she was all right. So I'll ask you, Mia, are you all right?" Her hand tightened around the notepad she carried. No one at work had ever asked her that before. She blinked rapidly, as though the words had struck something fragile inside her. Then she shook her head again. "Thank you, sir, but I'm fine. What would you like to order?" Sundar sighed inwardly, realizing she wasn't ready. He ordered something small, but his eyes never left her. He noticed the way other waiters looked at her, some annoyed, some whispering. He noticed how the manager scolded her when she moved a little slower than the others. It wasn't just her personal life. Even here, she seemed to carry invisible burdens. After his meal, Sundar left quietly. But he didn't go home. Instead, he waited outside again near the bus stop until he saw her leave. Just as before, she walked with heavy steps, her small figure shrinking into the night. This time Sundar stayed closer, determined to understand more. She entered the same apartment building as before, but tonight, the door of her apartment wasn't fully shut. Through the small gap, Sundar heard faint coughing, the cough of a child. He froze. The sound was weak, strained, the kind of cough that came from more than a simple cold. His heart clenched. The boy in the photograph. He could see Mia's silhouette through the curtain. She knelt beside the child, holding a glass of water, brushing his hair gently while whispering words of comfort. Sundar stepped back, guilt washing over him for intruding into such a private moment. But the truth was undeniable. Mia was not just struggling, she was fighting to keep her child safe, to hold her world together with fragile hands. As he turned to leave, a sudden noise broke the quiet. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Sundar stepped quickly into the shadows just as the same man from the previous night appeared. He banged hard on Mia's door, his voice low and threatening. "You can't hide from me, Mia. You know what I want." Inside, Sundar heard her voice, trembling but firm. "Please, not tonight. He's sick. I'll find a way. Just give me more time." The man's response was sharp, filled with coldness. "Time is running out. If you don't pay me back, you know what will happen." Then came silence, followed by the heavy thud of his boots retreating. Sundar's hands shook. Everything was clearer now. Mia was drowning in debt. The man was no stranger. He was someone who held her in his grip, threatening her safety and the safety of her child. Sundar knew he couldn't walk away, not anymore. But the question lingered in his mind like fire. How far had things already gone, and how much danger was Mia truly in? He looked once more at the apartment door, then at the quiet street. His breath caught in his throat, because, standing across the road, hidden partly in shadow, was another figure he hadn't noticed before. Someone else was watching Mia's home, and this time, it wasn't the man from before. The second shadow. The night was colder than before, and Sundar felt it seep into his bones as he remained hidden across the street. The first man had already left after threatening Maya, but Sundar's eyes stayed locked on the new figure standing near the corner. This person wasn't moving, wasn't pacing angrily the way the other man had. Instead, they stood completely, still blending into the dark, their face partly hidden beneath a hood. Sundar's breath slowed. He had faced pressure from rivals, criticism from the world, but there was something unsettling about this silent watcher. For a long time, The hooded figure just stared at Mia's apartment, unmoving. Sundar's heart pounded, torn between confronting the stranger and protecting Maya without alarming her. Finally, after what felt like endless minutes, the figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Sundar exhaled, his mind racing with questions. Who was this? A friend? An enemy? Or someone else connected to the man who threatened her? He didn't know, but one thing was certain. Mia was caught in something far deeper than he had imagined. The next day, Sundar couldn't shake the image of that apartment. Even in his office, surrounded by reports and numbers, he found his thoughts wandering back to the coughing child and the girl who worked herself to exhaustion while carrying a mountain of debt. He thought about how easily most people overlooked her. Customers who saw only a waitress, co-workers who judged her slowness, managers who scolded her for mistakes. No one knew the battles she was fighting outside those walls. Later that evening, Sundar returned again to the restaurant. This time he noticed more details. How Mia smiled at a family even when her own heart seemed heavy. How she gave an extra piece of bread quietly to a homeless man who slipped in unnoticed. How she took a deep breath every time her hands trembled but never stopped working. Sundar realized something important. Her strength wasn't in being flawless, it was in continuing despite the weight crushing her. When she came to his table, Sundar decided to test the waters. Your son, he said softly, sliding the crumpled photograph across the table. He looks happy. The blood drained from her face. She froze, her lips parting as if the air had been pulled from her lungs. Where did you get this? She whispered. You dropped it, Sundar replied gently. Yesterday. Her hands shook as she snatched the photo back, pressing it tightly against her chest. Tears pooled in her eyes, but she blinked them away, forcing herself to stay composed. Please, don't ever mention him here. No one can know. Why? Sundar asked, keeping his tone kind, not demanding. But she shook her head fiercely. Because if they find out, they'll take him from me. The words cut through Sundar like a knife. He wanted to ask who they were, but before he could, the manager barked her name from across the room. Mia quickly bowed her head and hurried off, leaving Sundar with a heart heavier than before. After his meal, Sundar waited outside again. Sure enough, when she finished work, she walked the same path back home. Tonight, Sundar made a decision. He couldn't just be a silent watcher anymore. When she reached her building, he approached carefully. Mia, he called softly. She turned, startled, fear flashing across her face. But when she recognized him as just the quiet customer, her body relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained guarded. Why are you here? She asked. Because I don't think you should carry this alone, Sundar replied. She shook her head. You don't understand. People like me, we don't get saved. We just survive. Sundar stepped closer, his voice filled with sincerity. I understand more than you think, and maybe I can help. For a moment, her defenses cracked. Her lips trembled, her eyes softened, but then she pulled away. If you help me, he'll come after you too. The man you saw last night, he doesn't forgive. And the other one, he's worse. Sundar's heart skipped. The other one? She swallowed hard, her gaze darting to the dark corners of the street. He's been following me. I don't know who he is, but I feel it. He's always there. The fear in her voice was raw, so raw it made Sundar's chest ache. He wanted to promise her safety, but promises without action were meaningless. Still, he couldn't reveal who he truly was yet. She wouldn't believe him, and it might even scare her more. Then let me walk you inside, Sundar said. She hesitated, then finally nodded. Together they climbed the worn staircase, each step echoing softly in the quiet building. When they entered her small apartment, Sundar finally saw the boy in person. He was curled under a blanket on a thin mattress, his face pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. Mia rushed to his side, brushing his hair back, whispering comfort. Sundar's throat tightened at the sight. He's been sick for weeks, Mia said softly, almost ashamed. The medicine costs too much. I've been trying, but every paycheck disappears before I can even buy what he needs. Sundar felt a lump in his throat. He knelt slightly, looking at the boy. "What's his name?" "Arav," she whispered. Arav stirred, opening his tired eyes for a moment, looking at Sundar curiously. Then with a weak voice he whispered, "Mama, is he a doctor?" The question broke Sundar's heart. He smiled gently. "No, little one. Just a friend." Arav gave the faintest smile before closing his eyes again. Sundar stood, his resolve hardening. He couldn't allow this to continue. But before he could say more, a loud knock suddenly shook the door. Both Sundar and Mia froze. Arav stirred again, frightened by the sound. Mia's face went pale and her eyes widened with terror. "It's him," she whispered, her voice breaking. The knocking grew louder, more violent. The voice outside thundered through the thin walls. "Open the door, Mia. You can't hide forever." The door that shook, the pounding on the door grew louder, each strike echoing like thunder through the thin apartment walls. Arav whimpered, under the blanket, his small hands clutching his mother's arm, his wide eyes filled with fear. Mia froze in place, her breathing shallow, her face pale as if all the strength had drained from her body. Sundar stood still, his eyes fixed on the door, his chest tightening with each violent knock. "Mia!" the voice roared from the other side. "I know you're in there. Open up before I break it down." Sundar felt a surge of anger rise within him. It wasn't just the noise or the threat. It was the way the man's voice carried cruelty, as if he enjoyed watching fear spread like fire. Sundar stepped closer to the door, his voice calm but steady. "Leave. She doesn't want to see you." There was silence for a moment, then a harsh laugh. "And who are you? Some new customer she's playing games with? Get out of the way, old man. This has nothing to do with you." Sundar's jaw tightened, but he didn't shout. He had learned long ago that true strength didn't always come from raising your voice, but from holding it steady when the world tried to shake you. "It has everything to do with me now," he replied firmly. The man's tone shifted, darker. "Then you've just made a mistake you'll regret." The handle rattled violently, then the door shook as the man slammed his shoulder against it. Mia gasped, rushing to push a chair against the door, her hands trembling. "Please," she whispered to Sundar, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't do this. If he knows you're involved, he won't stop. He'll ruin you too." Sundar turned to her, his voice softer. "He can't ruin me, Mia, but he is ruining you, and I can't stand by." The door shook again, harder this time. The sound of wood beginning to crack filled the room. Arav started coughing, his frail body shuddering as he tried to hide under the blanket. Mia bent down to soothe him, her face breaking apart in quiet desperation. "Just let him in," Mia whispered, as if surrender was her only shield. "If I give him what little I have, maybe he'll leave us alone for another week." Her words cut into Sundar like glass. Here was a woman who had given everything she had, reduced to the belief that survival meant feeding the demands of someone who preyed on her fear. Sundar clenched his fists. No more. He pulled the chair back from the door and before Mia could stop him, he unlocked it. The man stumbled forward as the door opened, his eyes widening in shock before narrowing into fury. He was tall, his coat heavy and worn, his face sharp with arrogance. When he saw Sundar standing there, calm and unmoved, his lips curled into a sneer. "So this is the fool trying to be a hero," the man spat. "Do you know who I am?" "No," Sundar answered evenly, "and I don't care. What I do know is you don't belong here." The man took a step closer, his hand reaching for Sundar's collar, but Sundar didn't flinch. Instead, he took a single step forward himself, closing the distance, his voice dropping to a tone that was quiet but commanding. "If you touch her again, if you threaten this child again, you will answer to me." The man hesitated, thrown off by Sundar's unshaken stance. People usually cowered in front of him, but this stranger's eyes held no fear. Instead, they carried a weight that seemed immovable, like stone. "Do you have any idea what she owes?" "Me?" the man hissed. "Months of rent, loans, interest. She signed the papers. She belongs to me until the debt is paid." Mia's voice cracked from behind. Stop, please, don't make him angry. But Sundar's eyes stayed locked on the man. No one belongs to you, he said firmly. Debt does not give you the right to destroy someone's life. The man growled in frustration, but before he could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Another figure approached, and then from the shadows of the corridor, the hooded watcher appeared. This time, Sundar saw his face as he lowered the hood. He wasn't another collector. He was younger, with tired eyes and sharp features, but his expression was not cruel. It was conflicted. He looked first at Mia, then at Arav, and something flickered in his gaze, something almost like guilt. Leave her alone, the hooded man said quietly to the collector. The room froze. Mia's eyes widened. No, not you, she whispered, her voice breaking into shock. The collector scoffed. So you're still hanging around, are you? I told you she's not your problem anymore. The hooded man's fists clenched. She was always my problem, he said, his voice trembling between anger and sorrow. Sundar looked between them, his mind racing. Who was this second man? Why did Mia react as if his presence was even more painful than the collector's threats? Mia sank to the floor, her hands covering her face as tears spilled freely now. Why did you come back? She cried. Why now, when everything is already broken? The boy stirred at the sound of her voice, his weak cough breaking the silence. Sundar turned his gaze back to the hooded man, who stood frozen at the doorway, his expression torn apart. And then, like a storm that had finally broken its dam, the truth slipped from Mia's lips. Arav, he's your son. The weight of truth. The words hung heavy in the air like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of shock through the room. Mia's voice cracked as she said it again, quieter this time, as though repeating it would make it less painful. Arav is your son. The hooded man staggered back a step, his face pale, his lips trembling. His eyes darted toward the small bed where the boy lay coughing softly, unaware of the storm unfolding around him. My son? He whispered, his voice breaking in disbelief. Mia's tears fell freely now. Yes. But you left. You left when I needed you most. I had to raise him alone. I had to carry every debt, every shame, every struggle while you vanished into the dark. And now you show up again, watching from the shadows. For what? Guilt? Regret? The collector laughed cruelly, enjoying the chaos. Well, isn't this sweet? A broken family reunion. But let's not forget, none of this changes the fact that she still owes me. And if she doesn't pay, I'll take what's mine. Sundar's patience snapped. His voice, calm until now, rang with steel. Enough. You've had your last word. He stepped between the collector and Mia, his posture straight, his eyes burning with resolve. The room fell silent for a moment under the force of his presence. Who are you to stand in my way? The collector growled. Sundar took a deep breath. He had hidden his identity long enough, but now it was time. He turned slightly, his gaze steady. My name is Sundar Pichai. The collector blinked, confusion flashing across his face before it twisted into disbelief. What? That's a lie. But the hooded man's eyes widened with recognition. It's him. It's really him, he muttered. Mia's breath caught. She had seen Sundar before, of course, on screens, in headlines, a figure so far removed from her small world that she never imagined he could be sitting in her apartment. Why would someone like you be here? She whispered. Sundar's gaze softened as he turned to her. Because I couldn't walk away when I saw your pain. Because I remember what it means to struggle, and I refuse to let anyone crush. You and I have the power to help. The collector scoffed, though unease now flickered in his expression. So what? You think your name scares me? Sundar stepped closer, his voice calm but edged with authority that came not from pride but from truth. My name is not here to scare you. It is here to end this. If you continue to threaten her, you will not only face me, you will face every law you've broken, every crime you've hidden. Men like you thrive in silence. I promise you there will be no silence anymore. The collector's bravado faltered. He muttered curses under his breath, glaring at Sundar, then at Mia, before, finally storming out of the apartment. The echo of his footsteps faded into the night, leaving behind a tense, fragile quiet. For a long moment, no one spoke. Arav coughed again, breaking the silence, and Mia rushed to his side. Sundar watched her kneel, her hands gentle as she wiped the sweat from her son's forehead, and something inside him shifted. The hooded man, Arav's father, stood frozen, guilt etched into his face. "I never knew," he whispered. I was lost. I made mistakes, terrible ones, but I never stopped thinking about her. I never stopped thinking about what could have been." His voice broke as he looked at the boy. "And now he's mine, my son. I can't take back the years I lost, but please, let me try to make it right." Mia shook her head, her eyes full of anger and sorrow. "You don't get to walk in now and claim him. You weren't there when he was hungry. You weren't there when he cried all night with fever. You weren't there when I begged strangers for work just to keep us alive." The man's shoulders sank. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself. But let me at least help you now." Sundar placed a hand gently on Mia's shoulder. "You don't have to decide this tonight. What matters now is Arav's health. He needs medicine, he needs care, he needs peace. Let us start there." Mia's tears softened into silent sobs. For the first time, someone wasn't demanding from her. Someone was offering to carry the weight. She looked at Sundar, her lips trembling. "Why? Why would you do this for me? For us?" Sundar's eyes glistened. "Because I see my own mother in you. Because no one should fight alone. And because kindness, when shared, can change everything." The hours that followed blurred into quiet action. Sundar made calls, arranged for doctors, brought food, and assured Mia that her debts would be erased. The hooded man sat in silence, broken, watching as Sundar did what he himself had failed to do for years. As dawn broke, sunlight streamed through the window, touching Arav's sleeping face with warmth. His breathing was easier now, the fever reduced. Mia sat beside him, her hand still on his, her eyes heavy with exhaustion but finally at peace. Sundar stood by the window, watching the rising sun paint the sky with gold. In that light, he thought, of the countless unseen struggles hidden in the corners of the world. How many Mias, how many Aravs, how many stories of pain went unnoticed because no one stopped to care? When he turned back, Mia whispered, "Thank you." Sundar smiled gently. "Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing. Never lose hope no matter how heavy life feels. Because sometimes, when we least expect it, hope walks in through the door." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief, not despair. She nodded, and as Sundar left the apartment, the city awakening around him, he carried a new resolve in his heart. He had built companies, shaped technologies, changed industries, but here, in the quiet struggle of a mother and her child, he had been reminded of the most important truth of all, that real power is not in wealth or titles, but in the courage to show kindness when it matters most.